This is Revolutionizing Recruitment with Kathleen Duffy, the art of attracting, acquiring, and retaining talent. Here's Kathleen.
My guest this week is Jonathan Singel, the Global Head of Talent Acquisition at Spotify. Jon joined Spotify in 2018 from CLEAResult, where he had been Head of Talent Acquisition. His previous roles include talent acquisition positions at Avery Dennison and Verizon. Jon, welcome to the podcast.
Kathleen, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm curious, when you graduated from Penn State, was a career in recruiting on your radar?
It was admittedly not. However, which I'm sure most people say, right?
Welcome to the club.
Exactly. No, I will say, though, I was exposed to recruiting very early on in life. So my story might be a little different than others. So interestingly enough, both of my parents were in the HR/recruiting space. And for roughly 17 years through my childhood, they ran a search firm together. So although I was aware of recruiting and knew what it was, I was actually more interested in HR and being in a broader HR role. I had naturally been exposed to that growing up and had been exposed to it through this coursework that I was doing in school, and really wanted to, I guess if you ask what was my why, I wanted to impact people's lives positively. And I saw an opportunity to do that through human resources, and had always been really fascinated by business and how businesses impact society and the world that we live in. So if I could mesh those two worlds together, it would be an amazing journey throughout my life. But admittedly, recruiting was not necessarily where I had planned to be. A broader HR role was, though.
So you're not going to go into the family business?
So I didn't plan on it, no, and I guess I'm technically not now since I'm not running a search firm, but being in recruiting does feel like the family business to an extent, so somehow it did, the dark world of recruiting pulled me in.
Well, I think it's the best part of human resources personally.
I agree.
I think it's, it's just about learning new things all the time. I mean, you think about all the different jobs, and you've been in so many different industries too. What do you love most about recruiting? So
it's two things. I love, number one, going back to my why, the impact that we have on people's personal lives. The professional impacts the personal, and there's nothing more fulfilling for me than experiencing individuals move towards that next step. Do something in their career that is on their roadmap in terms of things they want to accomplish, and then seeing them impact the business that you're so passionate about. I couldn't do what I do at a company where I didn't believe in the mission and the impact that company was having on the world and the people that we're surrounded by. But then again, on the flip side of that, the impact that has on that individual's personal life, right? And how it impacts their to live better and provide for family and friends and themselves and plan for the future. So I would say I feel like it's the best of both worlds in terms of our opportunity to impact people, impact business, and then you impact the world. So tell us a little bit about your organization. You're the Global Head of Talent Acquisition. I can imagine that's quite a big team that you have. It is a big team, yes. We are approximately 200 people. So we're about 180 and growing globally. Our main hubs, but really our main hubs are now the world with work from anywhere. But the majority of the folks are in New York, Boston, LA, Stockholm, London, and Singapore. But we've had the opportunity with our amazing work from anywhere program to put people everywhere. We have now TA folks in Spain and Amsterdam and Canada and Austin, Texas. So it's really cool to be able to leverage this program and identify amazing talent that's sitting in places outside of those traditional hubs. So for your TA team, do you have like a centralized sourcing group, or do your TA folks, your recruiters, are they doing sourcing? Are they doing full cycle recruiting? I guess would be the better way to say that. No, great question. So I would say it's twofold, and then we're actually working towards what you described in the beginning. So how we're set up right now is our TA team is facing off to the business. And what I mean by that is we have core business units as well as our global units, which are finance and HR and communications and global affairs, all of the folks that are supporting and partnering with those businesses on a day-to-day basis. And when I came on board, we decided to restructure the team from a TA perspective. We used to be aligned by just R&D, which is our tech, our engineers, and business. And we decided to restructure the team so we have TA teams that support each one of those core businesses, as well as a team that supports the global units. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to really embed our TA team within the business to create a partnership where we felt we were putting our best foot forward when it comes to a true consultative relationship, when it comes to positioning yourself to be proactive and really anticipate the business's needs. When I think about TA professionals, I think what makes the really good ones are folks that are actually business people that wear a TA hat, and that goes in line with HR, broader HR professionals as well. And how we have it set up today within those teams, we do have sourcers. We also have talent acquisition coordinators that I think more often than not are that glue that really keeps everything moving. And we also have various levels of recruiter as well as managers. So our recruiters, to your point earlier, Kathleen, are full life cycle. So they are supporting the end-to-end process, but they do have sourcing support behind them. What we're looking to do and what I'm working towards doing as we speak is actually taking all the sourcing support they have right now and pulling that under one umbrella. I think it's been working well, but when I think about what will make it work better at Spotify, as well as just how I work, and it's something I really align to in terms of how we think. It's always about learning and thinking about ways to be better. And we have such a large organization. We're scaling with the business. I think working holistically and looking at the broader business is always really important. And I think if we have the sourcing function centralized, which is my vision, phase one was just getting sourcers on board and getting them productive. But now I want to centralize those folks so we're working more holistically across the overall organization.
Well, and I think that's the key to, especially organizations of your size, to be able to scale with the growth that you're experiencing. Because as our expertise is in sourcing, we coin it recruitment research. And I don't know if I'm always curious to ask other TA professionals, were you ever aware of recruitment research or that term before our paths crossed?
So I am, and I have to admit though, the reason I am is probably again, since recruiting is the family business. So I am familiar with it, but it's interesting. I will admit to you, a number of folks that I talk to, it seems that it's not something that as many people are aware of as you would think, but I personally think it's one of the game changers that will turn good to great. So I am familiar, and I think it's ultimately where you want to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've been doing this for 31 years, which is why, we wrote the book so that it would elevate the awareness as an alternative to contingent or retained search. But I do think that there are a lot of organizations that don't have the ability to have internal sourcing teams, and they're coming to firms like ours, and they're, what they're looking for is to start building those talent pipelines so that as they're looking to hire repetitive roles, whatever those are, a lot of them are in sales or in IT, they have the talent pool that's available for them today, but also into the future. And the ones that are doing it right are actually leveraging this information. So kudos to you guys over there.
No, thank you. And I agree. And I think one of the ways that sourcing organizations also really drive the business, to your point, it's that research that then provides insights that the business can then use to inform them on where we want to place talent and where we should place talent and what types of talent we should be going after. So, when I think about the sourcing organization and the types of folks we're bringing in and how we're training them, I always impress upon them that their jobs are probably some of the most important in the company from a perspective of, again, it's the insights that you're providing that will drive where our business goes in many ways. So it's so beneficial, and you're seeing more and more companies invest in it, which I think is good. I think it's super important. Another area we've invested in as well is TA operations. As you're seeing this massive growth, especially across our industry and some other industries, it's really important that you're doing everything you can from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective. And we've built an amazing TA operations team from scratch that, again, when I think about what are those game changers, I think it's really enabling us and empowering us to create a world-class experience and make sure that we're putting our best foot forward, and that not just our TA team, but our business is set up to run as efficiently and effectively as possible. So it's been really exciting to watch and be a part of.
Oh, great. I want to talk about the Spotify HR blog. I really have enjoyed reading the content that you guys share over there. And it's hrblog.spotify.com, right? So for our listeners that should rush to that right away. As Spotify was embarking on this big hiring year of 2022, right? You wrote a post that was titled Reimagining How Talent Flows in 2022. And you talk about preparing in 2021 in order to hit the track running in January of 2022. Talk to us about these three major elements of this planning process that you went through, Jon.
So you're absolutely right, Kathleen. It's really interesting because the planning for us started the beginning of 2021, really the January, February timeframe. And I have to say, thanks to the amazing partnership between HR and our business is what really drove that dialogue so early and enabled that planning to start. So when I knew what 2022 would look like, broad strokes, I realized that it meant a few things. Number one, when we think about people, we needed to scale the TA organization. And that meant really thinking about what types of people, what types of skills from a TA perspective, again, where, when we think about location, but then also when and how we onboard those individuals. I think that you can't invest enough time in that in terms of how you get folks indoctrinated into the company that they're going to be representing and partnering within, but also what it means to get those individuals productive. So we scaled the team by 55+%. So we have, from my view, some of the best people in the world. So we checked that box. But then it also comes down to how are those individuals working? And if you look at really our 4 core focus areas, and of course there's a lot more to it than this, but just to talk about it at a high level in how we work. And how we work isn't even just TA, right? It's how the business is working, how it's all working, because all those details matter if we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And one of the pillars is doing it better the first time. When you think about hiring and thinking about matching talent with the opportunities within your organization, how are you doing that? And do you have the right levers in place, the right mechanisms in place to make sure that you're aligning the right people with the right jobs? And how do you do that faster? Not just better, but how do you do it faster? Because not only does the quality need to maintain itself, but you also are trying to do that at a greater pace just based on the volume. We also look at it from, again, a business's perspective, and how are we interviewing? How can we drive a more efficient interview process? How can we get more data points faster? How can we get more quality data points to make sure that we're making the best decisions for both parties? In addition to that, and I'm sure you've already talked about this with a number of leaders out there, with the market being as competitive as it is, candidate experience is more important than ever, and it's something that is always top of mind for me. It's something that's always been top of mind for us. It's a reflection of your company. But where maybe in some companies and some industries it hasn't been top of mind, you really don't have a choice, right? Because the competition is just that fierce. So what we've also looked at are ways to really differentiate ourselves. And what I call that in terms of our pillars is, separating ourselves from the pack. And thinking about unique ways to present ourselves, making sure we're doing that in a personal way, making sure that we're creating meaningful communication and connections. Working in a distributed world has presented challenges and opportunities. And I think some of those opportunities are, how do you bottle up a lot of what folks would feel and experience in an office virtually? So we've been looking at different ways of doing that with our internal brand experts and as well as some external partnerships. And then number three, out of the four pillars, is our TA tech stack. We have the people, we're looking at how we're working and the experience we're providing. We also need to think about the technology we're giving those folks to enable and empower them to scale our sourcing efforts, to nurture our candidates in the best way possible. So over the course of the last 3+ years that I've been at Spotify, we've put in a new applicant tracking system. We've also plugged in technology that allows a lot of the steps taken to coordinate interviews to be automated, reducing the number of steps taken and also providing a better experience for those involved. And we've also plugged in an internal mobility platform that we call Echo. And what we're looking at right now is CRM tools. So a candidate resource management system that, again, will really help us scale that talent pool that we have access to. We get roughly 50 to 60,000+ applications a month. So you can just do the math on that and think about the number of individuals that our recruiters are looking at on a daily basis. And then most importantly is inclusive hiring. Inclusive hiring has always been top of mind for us. And when I think about inclusive hiring, I think about embedding inclusive hiring into the process. So it's a natural way of working. It's not a separate initiative. It's just how you work. And we have a really great partnership with our equity and impact team. And what we've been looking at doing this year is continuing to expand on our partnerships, build out those talent pools, and really take good to great. And I'm really excited about the results so far and looking forward to seeing how they continue in 2022.
Well, really fascinating. So, a couple follow-up questions to the first piece of, how do you do this better the first time, and how do you do things a little bit faster? You also write about hiring faster and better the first time, and man, we're pretty fast in our world, but a lot of people aren't, and we know it's not easy. So, how are you doing it?
No, thank you for asking. So there's a few things that come to mind that I'd love to share. One is we've put something in place that we call dynamic talent pipelining. So when you look at a lot of organizations and how they recruit, it tends to be fairly systematic for a reason, and I get that. And what we are trialing in certain areas of our business, we're not necessarily trialing across the board, but based on the results so far, I guarantee we'll start doing it across the company in a much broader way. And what I mean by dynamic talent pipelining is, we have X number of roles that we want to fill this year, and more often than not, you're prioritizing those roles. And you're saying, okay, we're going to fill these 10, and then we're going to fill these 4, then these 3, just based on, again, how you're prioritizing the skills that you need. And that's one way of doing it. Different way of thinking about it is, think about having a whiteboard in front of you and really just listing out all the skills that a particular team needs to ship a given product, and starting to just recruit for those skills, not being so intent on, again, a specific role, but the skills that the team needs to ship said product. And as you identify those skills, hire that talent. And over time, you see that painting, right, starts to become clear, and the masterpiece is complete. The team is filled out, and you have the team that you need to drive the business forward. So it's really reshaped how we think about recruiting, and the key words there, it's much more scalable, and it creates a more fluid and flexible process. And what we're seeing is we're hiring more people faster. So that's one way we're doing it faster. But how do you impact the quality? So we've done a lot when it comes to interviewing and making sure that we're putting our best foot forward in terms of how we're assessing candidates when it comes to our interviewing and putting rubrics in place. But we're also putting a refreshed assessment in place because our thought process is the more data points, the better. And maybe, just maybe, some of those additional data points just might also cause you to be in a position where you need maybe a little less human interaction, right? Because if you think about the number of interviews you're putting candidates through, the number of interviews you're putting your business through, there's a big time commitment there, and sometimes that doesn't create the best experience. So we're also refreshing our assessment to make sure that, again, we're getting more data points, maybe in some unconventional ways.
So do you have an assessment tool that you purchase, or have you developed one just for Spotify?
Yes, so we have an assessment tool. We partner with an external vendor, but the actual tool itself is a balance of what makes sense for us, folded into, I would say, the capabilities of that platform, if that makes sense. So a little bit of both.
Okay, great. I want to talk about this, kind of the skills component to what you commented on. With this crazy war for talent right now, it is really interesting as I'm talking with hiring leaders, how they are really moving towards that skills first approach to find new talent. And it sounds to me that skills first hiring is really becoming the norm at Spotify. Is that right?
Yes. And you could argue that, I guess to a degree, we've always been, and everyone's always, focused on skills, because skills ultimately make up the person that you're looking for. But I don't think we've really necessarily been doing it and always doing it right. When you think about recruiting, not even just thinking about Spotify, we get, again, very focused on, okay, this is the role description and here are the requirements of the role. That's not the same, right, as thinking about the skills that are needed for a particular position in a particular team. So you're absolutely right on target. And a lot of the roundtables I sit on, Kathleen, of TA leaders, you're hearing more and more about skills-based X, right? Whether it's skills-based interviewing or skills-based hiring. And I think it's really important that we all start to drive towards that direction, because I think it does a few things. Not only do I think that it is a better experience, but I also think that it helps remove bias from the process, right? I think what we really need to be focused more on are the skills, and more often than not, a little less focused on, the companies that people worked for or the universities that they went to. I regularly hear about people talk about narrow talent pools, and I think that create narrow talent pools, right? When we put those guardrails in place, there's so many amazing people out there that have great skills that would, run through a brick wall for any number of companies out there. But if you're not putting yourself in front of them, and if you're also not putting yourself in front of them in a way where they're able to really demonstrate the skills they have, and you're focusing on, again, some of those other things that I outlined, like, well, what companies have they worked for? What universities have they worked for? I think, you need to remove those barriers. They just become blockers, and it doesn't necessarily equate to hiring the best people. That makes sense.
I remember in the Stone Ages when I first got started, I believe it was Michigan State that had one of the top HR programs.
Yes.
And it was like, if you graduated from Michigan State, you are automatically guaranteed an interview.
Right. Exactly.
So I think it's great. So, with that, I'm sure you read this article, but that 40% of recruiters are now using skills data when sourcing on LinkedIn, and that's up 20% from a year ago. And one of the things that they talked about were that the digital skills seem to be much more prevalent than ever before. And the example that they used was in finance roles, and how they are looking for people with skills in digital currency. Are you guys, are your hiring leaders asking for certain types of skills now for their jobs as the world is changing?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know that from a technical perspective that so much has changed. I mean, Spotify being the platform that we are, and growing at the scale that we've grown, as you can imagine, I'll joke with family members and friends when they say, what types of engineers are you looking for? I'll say all of them, There's never to be enough. I mean, you name it, and we're looking for them. So the types of individuals we're looking for are predominantly the same. Yes, that evolves, right? But I think when I say individuals, I'm more so talking about the technical aspect of it. I think what we're seeing shift more and more, though, and again, that's not to say that there aren't some shifts in the technical skills. There always are, and that will always evolve. There's some skills that have become more and more important, right, in spaces like ours, like machine learning, as an example. But what I find even more fascinating is you think about how a lot of companies are working now. Again, coming back to being in a distributed environment, you think about leading, right? Leading a team that is predominantly virtual and not sitting together in the same space, being a team member in an environment that is virtual and distributed. So it's not necessarily just the skills for individual contributors, but the skills that leaders need to be effective leaders in a distributed environment.
Yeah, I've written a few articles about this, and it is leaders relinquishing control, and the fact that what was done even 3 years ago is not necessarily what's going to be right in the world moving forward. Now, what's interesting about the whole virtual environment is my company has been virtual from day one. Yeah. So this pivot to everybody moving from home was the same course of business. For us, the disruption, our spouses being in the house with us and our children and, all of that sort of thing. So it is very interesting to watch how people, leaders in particular, are learning how to let go and probably more importantly, how to trust.
Exactly. That's a great word.
And on that note, let's stop here. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Jonathan Singel, the global head of talent acquisition at Spotify, Jon talks about the importance of the content Spotify creates to connect with candidates.
When we think about recruiting and people say, what's the secret sauce? It's creating that emotional connection. That emotional connection you have with a company that starts during that recruiting process or maybe even before it, right? If you're really interested in that brand and you're targeting that company, that continues and it has a journey.
This has been Revolutionizing Recruitment with Kathleen Duffy. To connect with Kathleen or to learn more about recruitment research, go to duffygroup.com.